When you start living with the end in mind, everything starts to change. What are people going to say about you? What message is your life going to speak when you're long gone? Because you weren't born by accident. You didn't just happen to be where you're at and happen to watch this video. There is always a reason.
But first, I just want to say it's so great to have you here with me.
Awesome.
Our whole purpose here is to help people kind of have the boldness and the courage to even explore dreams that God's put inside them and then to walk it out. And you are a great example of that. So I'm kind of honored to have you on here.
Thank you.
So
I feel likewise.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So maybe I can get you to kind of introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about yourself.
Sounds good. So we have few people online, you said.
Yep.
At the moment.
Oh,
So hello to everyone.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't see you guys or hear you or see your chats because Joseph and I was trying to figure out how to use this app on my phone, and it was like 15 minutes in and out. So I can't see your chats, but perhaps I can read them later.
Yeah.
So cool. Welcome and thank you being part of it. But my name is Marina, and I was born and raised in Tajikistan. Tajikistan, it's Central Asia, so it's have very little to do with Eastern Asia. So it's not Chinese or Japanese. So I think more like middle. So it's west of China. We do share border with China, north of Afghanistan. So you probably heard all those stands like Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan. It's not very often you hear of that country, but it has phenomenal history, thousands of years old. It used to be part of Persian Empire before it was occupied by Alexander the Great, and then Islam came, and then Russian came. So such a rich history. So it's also very beautiful. In fact, New Zealand reminds me some parts of New Zealand, especially South Otago, Central Otago, reminds me of some of the parts of my own country. It's very beautiful. So that's where I was born, and that's where I lived until I turned 18. Shortly after I turned 18, I just packed one bag and left the country, and been traveling for about 15 years.
Wow.
Been all over. I lived in Russia and Scandinavia, specifically Norway, moved to the States and lived there for about 7.5 years. And meanwhile, just traveled as much as I could before I ended up in New Zealand. And been here now for, I think, about 5 years. And yeah, still on the go. Yeah, but that's just briefly before we dive in. And I presume, Joseph, you'll have some questions.
Yeah.
And we can go deeper later about my background and how I got to know Yeshua, Jesus, because I did grow up in a Muslim country, and my household was completely secular, non-religious as well. So there's more to this story about the encounter with God and all of that stuff. Yeah, but that's where I'm from. I'm married to amazing man Ryan. I hacked into his Facebook account to get online. And live in Tiana at the moment.
Wow, in beautiful Tiana.
Amazing Tiana, yeah.
Well, I mean, we're almost ready to dive in. I just want to welcome you guys to this Fuse Life episode number 4 of this podcast. And, we are all about God-given assignments, and everyone has a destiny. And there is nothing quite like walking out the assignments and dreams that God has for you. So I have a great example here in Marina, and I'm looking forward to going deep. So why don't you dive in? Whatever you want to say about your story, kind of like, you already kind of touched on it, how you found Jesus, what happened, and boom.
All right. Excuse me, I have a little cough. You guys can hear me well, right? With this mic.
Yep.
It's all good. Okay, where do I start? Goodness, how much time do we have?
Well, whatever kind of comes to your heart of important parts of your journey, we just go with that. No problem.
Sounds good. And I think I'll still be as brief as I can because there is so much to the story. And
Sure.
then if you, Joseph, or anyone online have any questions and they want to go deeper, please do so.
Yep.
I quite, I can be quite vulnerable, and because I know this can help heaps of people. But there are no uncomfortable questions. If it's uncomfortable, I'll let you know. So, all right. So I think I'll start with a more traumatic side of my story, which I did grow up in a very broken household, very dysfunctional. My mom did the best that she could to raise us. She was a single mom of 3 kids, and her story is just mind-blowing. It was just generation after generation of brokenness, and we can only give as much as we're given very often, right? We can only do as best as we know how to. So that was her story. She did do as best as she knew how to, and she worked really hard. She was a quality surveillance at the construction site, and at night she was also a professional dancer. Not a street dancer, but actually would go to the weddings and perform a traditional dancing. So worked heaps to raise us kids. And then when Soviet Union collapsed, which is a massive, story, and I'm not going to dive into it. In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. All the stans became independent, and our country, which had been under Russian occupation for a little bit over 100 years, just straight after Soviet Union collapsed and Russians started withdrawing, went into economical turmoil, really. Not only economically, but politically as well, because it is a Muslim country, but was quite secular. So all of a sudden, as Russians were withdrawing, radical Islam wanted to take over. And so we had a war. So economically, we're in a very bad place. We had a war. And also culturally, people were like, okay, who are we? Are we Tajiks, Persians, we Russians? So also where the cultural identity crisis was massive as well. So the war was pretty brutal because it's a civil war, horrific because here, brothers fighting against brothers. So that put my country in a very, very bad position where people were struggling to feed themselves, and there were no jobs. So a long story short, I was maybe 7, 8 at that time. My mom ended up selling her body to provide for ourselves. So we ended up pretty much growing up in a brothel. So a little bedroom, we had a 1-room flat. So we had 1 room and a kitchen. That's how we lived, 4 of us. And our place turned into a brothel where we would be locked in 1 room, 3 of us, and men would come, 3, 4, 5, sometimes 15. You'd lose account, and my mom would sell her body to provide for ourselves. And I'm not going to go into too much details. There's lots of traumatic, graphic things that we as little kids seen. My wee sister was probably 5, 6, and my brother 3, very, very young. So I ended up looking after them, and because also the money that my mom would get wasn't much money, because of where the country was at that point. But that was literally the only thing that she could do, because she couldn't put us in the care. She couldn't afford to do that. She lost all her jobs. There hardly were any weddings. All the construction sites were shut down. And that's what her skills. And I remember early in the stages, she was trying to go and find a job as a cleaner or doing the dishes. but she didn't have those highly marketable skills. And even at that point, those people who did, like teachers and lawyers and doctors, even they were absolutely struggling. People were picking up and leaving the country. So before she got into the stage of selling her body, she tried so many different and explored so many different things. At some point, she talked to one of the ladies and asked if she could leave us kids with that lady so she can go overseas and work. That's what a lot of people did. And I remember her being gone for maybe a month or so. I lost the count, and then she came back with nothing. So that didn't work out as well. And I was very young to understand anything, and the lady didn't take good care of us too. So that was, really, really bad situation. So before she took such a massive decision to sacrifice, she's tried so many different avenues. And it also didn't happen like all of a sudden, let's just turn our household into a brothel. I remember her just disappearing and getting involved with gangs, and some of those guys were mafia as well, because mafia involved in prostitution. They would actually find women to sell. And I think that she figured out, like, instead of working for someone, she would have them as a roof, sort of a protection, and she worked from home. And of course, that in a Muslim country, that was horrific. It's a small community. We already didn't have a father, so we were like an outcast. We were very poor. And on top of that, our mom turned into prostitute. And I hate to use that word when I talk about my mom. That's why it took me 30 years before I could, actually 32 years before I ever shared that with anyone, because I honor her and I love her so much. I never wanted to talk about her. But I also understand that's part of my testimony, that where I came from and where I am now, it's beating all the odds and statistics, really. So I'm giving that background to just kind of paint a picture how much it took for her to come to such a bottom where it's like, this is the only option to feed my kids. And there were people who were selling their children as well. And that was never an option for my mom. There were people who abandoned their kids and just left the country in hope to make money and send back. My mom tried that didn't work, because we were not in a good place and she just couldn't handle that. So when finally that gradual kind of falling into selling her body for money happened and transitioned into our home, because she felt more safe there, because then she could at least keep an eye on us and not leave us with strangers. So that was, again, her way of protecting and looking after us. But then, of course, we lived in a very tight community, so everyone knew. So we on the streets were absolutely ostracized. So we were thrown rocks at. We were called children of a prostitute. We fought a lot. Boys and guys would try to come and make some advances at us, and we had to fight a lot as well. So that was at home we would have pretty much hellish situation. Because you live among that, you just have you in that room, and you see men coming in and out, your neighbors, sometimes people and see on the streets. And on the streets we were outcast. So living in that, for my mom, I think she lived in so much shame and pain. She started drinking heavily to just numb that pain. So she would drink to cope through the day, to get her through the day, because she didn't see a way out. There were no social services. There were no churches around. Remember, it's a Muslim country with Russian, very communistic, atheistic kind of influence. Churches, Christians missionaries just start coming in, and we didn't know anything about that. So it's not like she could go and ask someone for help. Everyone was in a horrific situation. But a lot of people also had relatives. Tajik families are big. My family were not. So, and also them coming from such a dysfunctional background, an aunt that we had, she wasn't in a position to help us. So she didn't even had any, yeah.
How old are you at this time when all of this is beginning? Like, what age are you?
7, 8, 9.
Okay.
Yeah, probably going in on 10, 11. It's hard for me to, looking back, because at that point I didn't had a journal. I just only could go by memory. And the problem with memory as well, when you're living in such a trauma, you dissociate a lot to survive. So they were not, especially when it comes to dates, it's so muddled up. But if I sit down, and that's on my to-do list, and just start kind of figuring things out, I probably can tell you for sure. But at this point, where exactly it started, how it was progressing, all I remember that I definitely were coming to a teenage year, 12, 13, because by the age of 13, I already tried to commit suicide twice. Like seriously, I've been thinking about suicide all the time, because it was such a hopeless situation. And I was just looking, even my friends at very young age start drinking and doing drugs and getting involved in prostitution. So looking around, there were no hope at all. It's not like you think, oh, well, one day, I'll make it. I just have to, get through this. There were no hope. You just look around and all you can see is brokenness. And so I've attempted suicide twice, mainly because hope was not an option. And I was like, it's a matter of time before something bad happened to me. And on a few occasions, I was so close to being trafficked, unbelievably close. That's another story. And I've seen, really looking back, now I can explain that it was absolutely a miracle that it didn't happen. But by the age I was 14, I was like, okay, I figured out the best way to kill myself. Now looking back, I thought, oh my gosh, 14-year-old. So I broke two thermometers and gathered all the mercury from thermometers and put it in a matching box. And I knew that should be enough to poison me. So what I did, I wrote my mom a letter just explaining to her why I'm taking my life and how much I love her, but there's no way I can continue living like that. And went that day to school to not directly say goodbye to my friends, because I loved my school. That was my kind of sanctuary, my hiding place, the school. But before I continue, what happened, actually, one of the I think things that also kind of pushed me towards that my mom became very abusive physically. And sometimes she couldn't control herself because she lived in so much pain that it's produced so much anger, sometimes uncontrollable anger. So she'd drink and then would get angry, and for the smallest thing we would get beaten, like not just slap here and there, but I'm talking about an adult built-in kids. So I think because also at home I felt like I couldn't talk to my mom. It's not a safe place for me to be. I continuously ran away from home. So home wasn't safe. There wasn't a place, an orphanage, or none of that to go to. So that's kind of was the pushing point. And as I went to school that day and was coming back from school, a friend of mine invited me to church. And at that point, I had no concept of church at all. The only thing I could imagine is, what you see on TV sometimes, like Russian Orthodox, where you go into a dark, massive building, put a candle. It's mainly older people with covering heads, like there is no life. That's what I thought of church. but something within me just like was so how would I say, like irresistibly pushing me towards saying yes and going, and that's what happened. And it was weird because I was like, well, I can kill myself after church. Kind of, that's what I thought, ridiculous looking back and thinking about it. And so I got on a bus and went to her. It was in a different city, so it's taking us probably 30-40 minutes to get there. The church at that point provided a bus actually and picked up mostly kids. It were mostly kids who would go there, because lots of kids were just on the streets unsupervised, and it was so easy to reach them out. And those guys were missionaries from Korea. Korean are so on fire. They were so on fire. Right after the wall came down, Soviet Union collapsed, they just flooded a lot of countries like Tajikistan. They were amazing. So I came in, and they just rented the building. Like it was like a theater. So that was surprising. I came in, there were, light and just cheers, and like, oh, this didn't look like church at all to me. Nothing like what I imagined. And I sat down, and as soon as the worship started, singing started, the power of God just blew me away. And again, it was such a crazy environment, because when Korean pray, the walls shake. I mean, those guys, they prayed in the spirit. So they would start just the worship, before even worship, they'd start yelling and praying. So imagine this 14-year-old, never been to church. There's hundreds of people yelling on top of their lungs and praying in the spirit. And I'm like, what the heck? And they start singing. And all I can remember is weeping like I've never wept before. The presence of God was so real to me. And neither did I had any preconceived notions to even put a language to it. I had no idea. I could feel nobody was sitting by me on my right side. So I could feel this presence just approaching me and right there. And now I can put the words. Of course, then I had no idea what happening. I felt like it was a Father God himself put the hand over me, and he said, you are right. You're going to be all right now. You're mine now. And I had my face in my hands, and I just wept and wept and wept. Wow. And it was my first encounter with God that I'm aware of. I had glimpses of it before, and I've seen some miracles in my life before I encountered him that tangibly. But that was the moment where I experienced love. And there was a changing moment, because at that moment also there was so much darkness in me, enormous amount. By that time I already started smoking and drinking. I knew how to lie, make my way. I started stealing. I beat people up. I was in a lot of fights all the time. So that darkness, I was feeding that darkness as well. I saw lots of brutality towards people and animals all the time. So I was in that instant, that darkness was filled with light, so much so within such a short amount of time. A classmate of mine who was an atheist came to me and said, I used to not believe in God. I'm looking at you, and you're turning me into a believer.
Wow.
The change was so amazing. Jesus' light just came and flooded that darkness in me, because I was growing and I was nurturing, and because I didn't know any other way. And of course, so that was, I'm kind of jumping ahead of me, but that was such a pivotal point in my life, because it was a real encounter that you can't convince me otherwise. Nobody could convince me otherwise. I had no preconceived notions. I didn't have any religious background. And that began my journey walking in the presence of God and learning about the Father. And he started literally parenting me. Like all those developmental stages that I've missed, and I've missed heaps of developmental stages as a child, he started teaching me as a father would teach his daughter, just fundamental principles, like even core values, moral core values that I had not a lot of concepts. I've learned quite a bit from my mom. Even though we lived in such a brokenness, there were some, like her protecting us, right? Her, I remember like we would be so poor that, we wouldn't have enough food all the time. We always were hungry. But if someone came on the door and knocked and asked for food, she never sent them empty-handed, even if that meant we would eat less. Like watching, like looking back and seeing, of course, at that point, I thought that's what you do. That's normal. That's what you do. I never used to get angry at mom or, for taking food from us. Like you never say no. So there are some amazing principles that I've learned from her, but in terms of, developing morally and mentally and emotionally, I was at such a basic level. So he just took me by hand and started teaching me. Amazing stuff. So yeah.
Okay.
So that was my encounter.
Yeah. Man, like there's someone here commenting like that you beat people up. It's so hard to believe.
Really? You don't know me well.
Okay, so all of this is going on. You're 14, then somehow you end up. We got to fast forward a bit of the stuff because otherwise we'll be here all night. But somehow you end up.
Could you, before you form the question, I really need to go to the toilet.
Oh yeah, please go.
I'll be right back.
No worries, we're casual here. I'll just sit here and talk. One of our big things here at Fuse Life is that you have a God-given assignment, and either you know about it or you don't know about it. You might not know about it, but you're being trained for your assignment. Or you might know about it and you are obedient, and your obedience is causing an acceleration into your God-given destiny. And so here we have a story. I mean, his story is crazy. This is like, I don't know the full story either. So hearing some of this stuff's blowing my own mind. But now we get to see now, I guess this is an intermission, and now we're going to see how she's ended up where she's at now. And each one of you have an assignment, just like she is on an assignment right now. You have an assignment too, and your assignment will bring about complete life change and transformation to somebody somewhere. And it is so exciting to know that God made you on purpose, with a purpose, for a purpose. And this is like, we got people here saying they're crying, Marina, and someone is having a good laugh that you needed to go to the toilet. But
I'm pregnant. That's why I'm gonna go to the toilet a lot. The baby is pushing on my bladder.
You're pregnant? Like, did I know that? I don't know if I knew that.
I didn't know.
Hey,
no,
congratulations!
Thank
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. Okay, so let's hit this thing. So, how did you end up from 14 years old having this encounter? You're just about to kill yourself. Now you're not going to kill yourself, and you end up in America. Like, what's the short version of that?
Oh my gosh. Before I ended up in America, I lived 2 years in Russia, 2 years in Norway.
So maybe quickly, how are you funding this? Like, who's paying for it? How the heck did you get out? Like,
I was just talking to Rod actually about it, how people are shocked. Every single way of the way, Papa was leading me. I mean, when I say he became my Papa, my father, I actually mean it in every aspect, emotionally, mentally, physically, financially as well. The provision was phenomenal. Well, first of all, I'm a really hard worker. One thing that my mom instilled in us is work ethics. I'll work my butt off, like 2-3 jobs. So I'm a very hard worker. But in terms of getting to places like Russia and Norway and America, those were divine just miracles, absolute miracles. Like, sure, Russia was hellish. It's 2 years of survival. I went to Bible school there very briefly. Spent about a year in a Bible school, and that was, if you can survive Bible school in Moscow, you can survive anything. It's a survival Kim. And then, but in Norway, the way I got to Norway is when I was in Tajikistan and the whole encounter came. I encountered God. Shortly after that, my mom kicked me out of the house because I spent so much time in church. We had an argument. She beat me up. She said, enough of that church cult thingy. You have to choose. Either you stay home or you go to church, which is so bizarre in a way because we were pretty much raising ourselves anyway. We're in the streets most of the time. So, of course, for me, I chose church. So for a while, I lived on the streets. And then I ended up in an orphanage there that was run by missionaries from Norway. And those missionaries, out of all the kids that were there, they decided to take me into their house. So they became my first foster family. Well, the awful thing is, shortly after that happened, maybe for 2-3 months, I lived with them. We had a civil war again broke out, really brutal civil war in the city. So they had to flee the country because it was very unsafe for foreigners. And they couldn't take me with them. So they left. Long story short, I ended up in Moscow. When I ended up in Moscow, they connected with me and invited me to Norway. So I ended up going to Norway actually to stay with them. So I spent about 2 years staying in Norway and had an amazing, amazing time.
Wow.
And then a lot of time of healing and but then I had to come back because my mom was dying. She was very, very sick. And I knew if I don't come back, that would be the last time I saw her. So I came back to Tajikistan. And about a week later, my mom actually ended up dying at a very young age. She was only 43. And you can imagine living that life and then also drinking lots of, which I'll talk about it later, why I'm actually doing what I'm doing. And prostitution goals don't last very long. It's a very short lifespan. And I had to take care of my brother and sister while I was in Tajikistan. And my sister had a little baby by that time. So that was horrible because they, again, no jobs. I had no money when I came back from Norway because I didn't go there to earn money. And I'm working 2 jobs trying to look after them, look after the baby of my sister. And I was like, it wasn't a good time. So I started looking at opportunities to leave again. And the cultural exchange program came up to go to America. I was doing all the research myself. I worked at the internet cafe at that time. So I had access to internet, which was a luxury. So I did heaps of research and found a website where I put my profile. It was cultural exchange program where you can go to America, stay with the family, look after their kids in exchange for food and board and some pocket money. And I just applied. And the family responded and we started the process. But the miracle was phenomenal because as I had to go to the capital to have an interview with American consular. And I have all these people in front of me who was applying for a visa to go to America. and they all had connections and money and invitations to school. And some of them had scholarship, all these people in front of me. And going denied. And I'm like pretty much the last one. And I thought, oh, well, obviously I'm going to be denied. And I actually don't even remember what I was thinking then, but it was quite discouraging. All these people getting denied. I go in, he asked me a couple of questions. We laughed together. I don't even remember. He goes out, he comes back with 2-year visa. Was it 1 year or 2 years? So I come out with my passport and visa and nobody can believe it. So that happens a lot. That's Papa opening the doors because for whatever reason, he needed me there. And that's how I went to America. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Man, so
It was very brief version.
Yeah. Are you writing a book? Surely there's a book coming. Surely there's a book. There's a mini movie and a book all wrapped up in here.
I think once our project is really running and we're saving lives, then I'll write a book. At the moment, it's a story of my life, but that's not enough. Yeah.
Well, some would argue that it's a pretty crazy story and it's enough. But so you're in America. How long from there till you coming to Te Anau, and what happened for you at Te Anau? Again, brief. Tut.
Oh my gosh. So 7.5 years there, coming to, I actually came to New Zealand because I was in a relationship. I was in courtship relationship with a guy, Christian guy who was a Kiwi American.
Mm.
And we were back and forth for 3 years. He'd come there, come here. I came here once and it didn't work out. Thank God. Otherwise, I would have never met Ryan sitting here listening. And then when that didn't work out, I'm like, okay, what do? I go back to America. And I felt strong nudge to come down south. Like, doesn't make any sense. I'm running out of all my money. I don't have a job. I have massive financial responsibilities. I was supporting a family at that time who went through human trafficking and all of that stuff. I was like, I can't. I have to leave. I get online, try to book tickets, can't. Like, okay. So I just got rid of most of my stuff, again, packed the bag and went down south by bus. I was on my way to Queenstown, stopped in Gore for a little bit, ended up staying in Gore for 6 months, working on the farm. And then went to a church in Gore and met team from Tiano there. And it was an instant connect, the dreams, the goals, the visions. And shortly after, maybe 3-4 months later, I felt a strong call to come to Tiana to do the sonship. And I was like, no way. At that point, I thought Bible schools are for losers. Seriously, why would you go to Bible school? Kind of thing, like roll up your sleeves, get the work done kind of thing. I've changed my mind since, which is good. But basically, my first response was like, no way, I'm not going to any Bible school. And then I was like, okay, if you want me to move to Tiano, I need very precise confirmations. And I don't normally ask God for confirmations. I'm really trusting his voice. But in this case, it was like, and amazing confirmations came. And I moved to Tiano to join the team. But basically, I moved to Tiano because of Benji and Alana. Kinder hearts, spirits, world visionaries, phenomenal dreams. There is so much but they were the reasons why I moved, and they were the reasons why I decided to stay for so long. I went through the sonship, through revival schools. I went through missions trip and dreamed and developed vision while I was here. I pretty much grown within probably 2-3 years. I've grown. The growth was exponential, unbelievable. It's probably would have taken you 10-15 years to achieve the amount of stuff I achieved while I was here.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a testament. Benji and Alana. I love them. They're amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so we should probably start talking about what you do now. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your project, your dream? Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, when I left Tajikistan, I said, God, I will do anything. You'll send me anywhere. I'll do anything except for 2 things. Never send me to Muslim country or Tajikistan. I hated anything to do with Islam, and especially Tajikistan. There was so much pain involved. Of course, I just scratched the surface. There was crazy stuff. And the second thing, I never wanted to work with working girls or prostitutes or anything to do with human trafficking. It was way too close to home. My sister was trafficked. My mom was exploited. I was almost trafficked. I've seen my best friend was trafficked and never been the same. Like, I've lost some friends to prostitution, trafficking, and drugs, and I was like, send me somewhere, I don't know, Africa. That's what we see, right? And so that was it. That was like kind of 2 conditions that I'll do wherever, just not that. And there was a very pivotal point. Again, it wasn't gradual. It was God just knocked me out phenomenally. It was 2011, where I was part of Messianic congregation now. And that's kind of an important part of the story, because I think some of you guys need to hear that the process. It's cool to say, and now this is what I'm doing. I'm like, before I got there's something that happened that have revolutionized my world for me to go from never. I absolutely never gonna touch that. That's the most painful part of my life, never, to now being so sold out and passionately pursuing that. And very often, I love to say that most painful experiences of our life will turn into the most powerful strength, the areas where we can empower people if we let the healing if we let Papa heal us and take risks. So that's what happened. In 2011, I'm part of Messianic congregation. We're doing Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is Day of Atonement. It's one of the high holidays for Jews. And that's where you fast, water fast, food fast, and the whole congregation come together and we pray and we recite these powerful generational prayers. And as we're there, it's a Shabbat and we're praying. Sometimes it becomes almost like it's just a tradition. And all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit just comes so powerfully upon me that I just start weeping. And everyone sit down to continue the service. I can't. I just weep. So I had to excuse myself, go and lock myself in one of our office rooms and get on the floor. And I just had a snot anointing, basically, where I just like wept. And yeah, it was crazy. And as I kind of start coming into my senses, not even knowing, kind of almost like drunk, I look up and we had this massive map on our wall and I walked towards the map and I put my hand and I kept weeping and praying and mainly just weeping, not knowing what, spirit was wailing. And then when I finish, I take my hand off and right in the middle of it actually was Tajikistan. And right in that moment, God said, I want to send you to Tajikistan and I want you to work with survivors and victims of human trafficking.
Wow.
And I just it was so clear in my spirit. And it's in an instant, again, it wasn't transition. In an instant, my heart from being really distant and cold and shut to all of that, I think all 4 chambers of my heart just opened and this revelation God loves just poured into my heart. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely, yes. When I was so ready, I was like, I went home that day and I was like, okay, start planning what I do, how am I going to make this happen, and even living in America, you think land of opportunities, I was financially constantly broke because I was supporting a family. So about 70% of my income constantly went into supporting that family. So I was always like struggling financially. I'm not able to get ahead, although working like a couple of jobs. And so I thought, how am I going to make this happen? So I tried planning and he said, chill out, sit down in the bed. We're going to talk about it. So he gave me what I felt at that point, a plan, how I'm going to pursue that. Long story short, what it was about 10, 15 year plan, when I ended up in New Zealand, when I ended up in Tiano, finally those dreams started becoming into first developing a vision, and then seeing the results. So what Ryan and I are doing now, we're building a safe home in Tajikistan. And it's a safe home for survivors of human trafficking as well as domestic abuse, which is a massive problem, and also unborn children. Abortion is a massive problem in Tajikistan. So we actually only started 2 years ago with absolutely nothing, had no resources. I went to Tajikistan, saw a land, saw unfinished building. I was like, okay, this is the project. And we decided to buy it. And a couple of years later, we raised over $100,000, and actually quite a long way from where we began. So it's still a long process, but within that, it's called House of Chillon. So that's just based on the promises that God given to me, and because he invited me into partnering, because I knew with when he called me to do that, I was like, I'm not equipped. I have no resources. I don't have skills. So like Moses, right, giving all the reasons why I couldn't do certain things. And he's like, no, I'm asking you to partner and not carrying that on your shoulder. So partnering means you're going to only do what I equipped you to do. I was like,
Mm.
sweet, that's cool. I think I can work with that, you know. So I went into that with the whole mindset of I'm partnering. I'm not carrying anything. I'm not taking that weight on my shoulders as I used to do with everything, with my family, with my siblings, you know. Hence why I got so sick. But in this case, I was like, I'm too exhausted. I can't do this. He's like, partnering. So I went into partnering, and now seeing that, in fact, some of you actually have seen the brochure. It's called Project Tajikistan. I just actually happen to have it right here, and I see if I can. Some unbelievable testimonies actually as a result in terms of provision. But this is, let's see if you can guys see. This is how it looks in 2017. So that was the building. And this is how it looks now. So we've done actually lots of work. We put a roof on it, and done heaps of work inside as well. But that's brochure. I can send it to you guys if you want. That brochure outlines the vision of the project, what we have, what we had when we started, what we're doing now. Within that project, there's 3 other projects. One is agricultural center, which I call Teaching Men to Fish, and basically teaching people how to feed themselves and grow their own gardens with the land that they have. There's so much more to that. Second project, it would be a hostel, which we're going to be developing tourism, and hopefully also a skilled center. And that's for-profit project. Basically, we're looking at the ways how can we sustainably continue House of Chillon without relying on the resources outside, but generating those resources inside. And third is Kids Developing Center. So that's basically when it comes, especially when it comes to human trafficking, you need to, there's so many different dynamics and so many very different work that you can do. One being prevention. Prevention is working with children, which is so essential. That's where everything started. Education, protection, equipping as well. So developing center for kids, that's something that is burning on my heart as well. And that would be also nonprofit. So at the moment, everything is other than House of Shalom, those other 3 projects are in a dream stage. There's many different stages, right? So those are in a dream stage and kind of developing vision for them. But House of Shalom, it's quite, we believe that we can finish it by the end of the year. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's where we're at. And July, I'm going to Moscow and Tajikistan as well. So I'm trying to go there every year and take teams. So last year I had 5 amazing Kiwis joining me, and this year I'll have 2 people. Owen Pamana is coming as well, and my other friend Amy Northcote. I'm going to do some work in Moscow. Moscow, there's an amazing organization who already work with women on the streets, so we can see how we can partner in bringing those girls to back home, especially the girls from Tajikistan. Once we have the house ready, and Tajikistan, we're going to minister to the team on the ground, because we have a really amazing team on the ground partnering with. So that's what we're working on now.
Wow. And I got to meet a couple of them in India last year, and they're amazing.
Yes, Alexei, that's the project manager in Alona. Yes, they are.
Wow. Okay. So I guess there's a double-sided thing here. Maybe first we could talk about, like, what is, I know you would have had so many challenges, but what is one challenge that might stick out to you that you kind of had to work through? Do you have an example of something like that, or?
In relation to the dreams and projects, or my personal life?
The dreams and projects and stepping out, because obviously it's an extension of who you are. And so how you know, like, there are people that are like, yeah, I know God's calling me to this. What was the next step after that? After you knew he called you, what was the next step or next kind of process you went through in yourself?
Of course, I went through doubting, massive doubting, in terms of, can I do that? And that's the conversation with God, looking at the current resources. My current resources were incredibly limited. especially at that time, I still was in Tiana on a religious visa. So I actually wasn't even generating any income. I lived by faith. I used to roll my eyes on people who lived by faith. That is so bad. I used to be so bad in terms of like, no, you move your chops, you work. that was my kind of attitude, right? I was like, no, you gotta work. So because my whole life since I was 14, I always worked. So when God called me to live by faith, that was out of my depth. I've kind of always lived by faith and he provided, but I've always, my whole life I worked. So that was first time I was illegal to work. So that's why when God called me to that, I was like, I'm reading rice, for God's sake. Seriously, like I'm not equipped to do this. Not that there's anything wrong with eating rice. My attempt to joke. Thank you for laughing. But I think that was one of the challenges. I was looking at the current circumstances and current resources. And although God provided abundantly, I think there were so many miracles in my life. My mentality was still poverty mentality, big time. And so I looked at my current resources and I thought, no way. But the amazing thing being in Tiana and being around the people that I was, like Benji and John, they were teaching me how to dream beyond my resources and how to not depend on my current circumstances. So I already had that boiling in me. So I just had to be very intentional about how does that look like in terms of big vision. This is my current circumstances. These are my current resources that are so limited. And I'm not good with going and raising funds. That's another thing that was a massive challenge because there was still pride that I was dealing with, my ego that I was dealing with. I'm like, I'm not going to churches asking for money. No way. And those are the challenges as well that I had to break through, thinking, okay, what value am I adding when I'm communicating what we are doing? So I think I'm kind of all over the place, but the main thing, to answer your question, the main challenge was looking at my current resources and then looking at the dream. Current resources, looking at the dream, and thinking, what does partnering with God actually looks like? And one of the promise that I just briefly outlined that, and it's actually in this in this brochure. He gave me Haggai 2, and one of the verse in Haggai 2, he says, the silver is mine, the gold is mine, and I will bring the wealth of all the nations to fund this house. He's talking to Haggai about start building the house of Shalom. Well, the funny thing is, shortly after that, a family comes to my house, knock on my door, says, can we stop by have a kappa? I don't know them. I've never met them. I've met them once in a church, different church where I spoke. They're bringing a small box, very heavy box. Ryan was there. I'm like, what the heck? They're like, we want to give that towards the house of Shalom. And there was 10 kgs of silver and 6 ounces of pure nugget golds.
Oh my God.
So this is an actual picture that we took. And that was, again, on Yom Kippur in October. So only a few months later, after God invited me to. So I was like looking at the gold and silver, thinking of Haggai. I'm thinking, oh, you mean it literally? He's like, yeah. I mean, I've never seen this. It's actually literal blocks of silver, 10 kgs and nuggets of gold, and that was the seed towards the project, which was phenomenal. And that, again, it wasn't by my strength. It wasn't because I'm such a good speaker. I barely sometimes can put two words together, bubble and that's Papa. That's Papa just, when he asked us to partner, and that's another thing. I think third thing was looking what my motivation. Is it to feed my ego? Is it, oh man, look how far I've gone. What is my motivation? And that's something I've always have to check myself. When it comes to serving to people, loving on people, doing things that not public, that most people have no idea, doing things in secret. And even when it's when I communicate in terms of what we're doing, what's my motivation? And that's another thing that I have to keep in check constantly as well, because we're human. Ego is a big part of us.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? To feel good? I'm serving God, and or what's the vision? What's behind it? Yeah.
And the motive. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So, man, what a story. So, right now, you've got
Amazing.
this house, it's being built, there's supernatural provision and way more to come. Are there any ladies already kind of that are in your space that you're already working with? Like, how many? Is there a number, something like that? Or
Yeah, it's not in the house because house is not finished.
Mm.
In terms of number, I have two families that I'm working with. One that I worked for many years, a single mom who went through, crazy trafficking, like those documentaries that if any of you watched about trafficking, which I highly recommend, if that's something you want to do, educate yourself as much as you can. Watch, let God break your heart, resurrect you. And one of the ways is watching documentaries. So the lady went through some horrific human trafficking experiences, and as a result was just really, really lost her health, mental, emotional, raising two kids. So I've been working with her for quite a while. And it's a very slow process. So we've been supporting her for many years, and still long way to go in terms of her healing. Sometimes we talk about yes, let's rescue people, but when it comes down to recovery and healing, man, there is whole another story. Like integrating them back into society with integrity, when the innocence been stolen, they've been shattered, they've been used and abused in all kinds of unimaginable ways. Road to recovery, unless it's supernatural, which happens, but I haven't seen it a lot. The road to recovery is very long. So we don't have massive numbers. So that's the family we're working with, and we've been supporting that family financially, covering all the costs because the lady can't work at all, pretty much. But now I'm pulling back and redeveloping the strategy. So still paying for her rent and a little bit of cash here and there. So that's one family, and another family that we are supporting. She's a widow. She just lost her husband, single mom with two kids, and supporting her as well. It's a very, very broken, dysfunctional family that she come from. So those are main things. And then we're supporting also people who are part of the team who working on the ground on the project. So financially supporting two families.
Wow.
So that's as far as our resources goes. A lot of our resources comes from our own paychecks with Ryan. And then when we have extra money, it goes to developing the House of Chillon. Yeah.
Wow.
So not massive numbers yet, but that's where you have to start. I'm not focusing on numbers at all.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
The depth is happening. So I guess my next question is there like persecution towards you? Is it dangerous? You're paying a price here? Are there people that almost like don't want you around?
Not yet. Thank God. I really believe in favor. And it's a massive challenge to work in Tajikistan in terms of corruption. So a lot of our work is not publicized. So you won't see House of Chillon on our website, Invest in a Life website. Invest in a Life website, actually a pretty cool website in terms of stories. You can read some real stories there, real situations, people that we work with, but nothing about the project. It's all undercover. It's all on on the basis of, it's privately owned. We're not registering as an organization for many, many reasons. Some of the reasons I outlined in the brochure. But that said, when I was going into this, that's another question that I had to God. What if? Because I know it's a monopoly in Tajikistan. So when it comes to attempting to build a business or an organization for profit or non-profit, it's incredibly challenging. Or with business, they'll let you develop it. Once it's generating the profits, they'll just take it away from you. There's nothing you can do. So that's why there's not a lot of foreign investors there. And if you want to register NGO, then you have to pay a roof, which means tax collectors, you pay them under the table to keep operating. So all of that I knew, and I was considered, and that those were the questions again to God, and what I'm sensing strongly, and what also been prophesied by some of the amazing people, it's favor with government. So instead of projecting, I have to be very careful even when people start talking about danger and, scary theory stuff. I have to be really protecting my heart and my spirit, and projecting grace, projecting favor versus fearing opposition. And what I tend to say now, if it rises, I'm going to cross that bridge when I get there. I'm aware of it. I'm aware of KGB. I'm aware they're keeping tab on us. I'm aware of all that stuff. When I take the teams there, they have no clue. Everything looks so amazing, but I'm always aware, even where we're going, who we're talking, know what's legal, so I have the education, I know, but instead of living in fear and thinking, what if, I'm projecting positive and thinking, if it comes to this, instead of anticipating it, I'm going to just deal with it when it arises, and trusting favor, trusting that God will open up favor where they would want us there, they would invite us there. Yeah. So that's
wow.
Yeah.
Man, that's awesome perspective.
Yeah.
This has been such a good chat. It's like we've been going an hour now.
Awesome. Cool. And I did most of the talking. I'd love to hear from people.
Great.
I wish I could hear them.
Well, I asked them if they have any questions, so some people are going to start sharing now. What do we have here? Love your honesty and vulnerability and vision for Shalom House that you've shared. What would your advice be to young women in New Zealand who have a similar passion and would like to do something like that here?
Very good. Very good question. Thank you for the words of life. Really appreciate that. Who is it, by the way?
That's Shilpa.
Of course. Love you, Shilpa. Few things you can do. Many things you can do. I think I'd say how I started. Oh my gosh. Perhaps start with education, learning. If you want to do it in New Zealand, because there's so much needs. Needs are everywhere. And they're good ideas, and they're things that God calls us to. You see, good ideas are amazing. Some of the incredible philanthropists investing in amazing things out there. When you have so much capital, that is so cool, right? The world is your oyster. You can solve so many problems. When you don't have that capital and resources, then in my case, I had to wait for invitation to partner with God on that scale, on the scale that I'm doing. So if you want to just, you have a heart and you want to do something in that area, I would say start with education, learning what some of the things that is happening in New Zealand in that area. Prostitution, obviously, heaps of prostitution. How this prostitution happening, a lot of it is gang related, and they're controlled by a gang. Here, heaps of gangs here. How then you can get connected with them. And sometimes it starts with one person. In my case, it did start with one family. I literally was for years and years supporting one family. It didn't start with a vision. It didn't start with a dream. I saw a need. I saw a family in need, a woman with single kids who couldn't feed her children and was still selling her body. And I made a deal with her. I said, okay, how about you stop selling your body and I'll provide for you. I had conditions. Thank you, Ryan. I had conditions. And I had certain rules that she had to abide by in order for me to support her. And it was a long road, but eventually it's, she stopped selling herself because she'd take the money and lie and she'd still sell her body. But with certain support group around, that's how I started. I started with one family. I started with one person. And I think faithfulness, it's one of the reasons. I think, what are we doing with the resources that we have now? And even I say start with education, but literally my education was on the streets. I lived that life. I saw that. I didn't have an epiphany and redefining moment. My everyday was redefining moment. But the way I started is I took something that I worked so hard for and that I needed. In fact, not long ago, I did the math. If all these years, I probably would have owned a house mortgage free, the amount of money that I gave away. And I didn't make a lot. It's just the amount that I gave. It's the question is, what are we doing now with the resources that we have? Instead of waiting for this big moment in our lives when we have a vision and when God's like, come and partner. Yes, Papa. Those are awesome. I've never dreamed that it's going to happen to me, really. I thought I had to work through everything, but I started with being good steward of the resource that I had. Am I going to buy myself a pair of good jeans, or I'm going to send this money to a family who struggles? I still sometimes buy myself a pair of good jeans. One. I shop. So I remember the moment where I opened this little flip-flop phone that I had, like really cheap. Now I have a fancy phone, but I had this really cheap, broken down. And my friend looked at my phone and he laughed. He's like, "Who even have those? They're ancient. Like, how in the world do you have this phone?" And I said, he basically tried to call me cheap. And I said, no. I spend very little on things I don't care about. And I'm extravagantly generous on things that I care. So it's like redefining what is your value? What do you truly value? What is really important to you? And investing in that is, if lives are more important to you, then redefine your lifestyle. Where is the most precious resource, which is money, because we work so hard for it, right? Where is it going to? And I think that would be my main, apart from, there's heaps of stuff you can do with education and advocating and prevention work and speaking to people about it. That one of the main things I think in my life that moved me forward is always questioning, am I good steward of the resources that I currently have? My finances, my time, my headspace. Am I good steward? And I always ask that. And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes I look at myself, it's like, no, at this point, I'm not. So what changes do I have to make again? Yeah.
Wow. Great perspective. We got two more things I want to touch on, and as we end.
Yeah.
One thing that I was going to ask anyway, but someone's asking, Adrian, she says, how do you find the House of Chillon? How do they find it? How do people find what you're doing? I guess she might have an idea or want to give or want to be part of it. How do people find you?
Through me, directly through me. It's nowhere online. It's word of mouth. Most of our investors are very close friends. I pretty much don't have anyone that have contributed that I don't know and don't do life with. So it's all through talking to me or talking to my friends and people who know me personally. We had some large sums come through, and that's knowing me personally. So there's nowhere you can find it. I can emails, I can send the brochure, but it's connecting through me. Yeah.
So you will give me an email address, and I can pass that on to those that want it. So if you want that, guys, you just send me a direct message on here, and I'll send you the email address, and you can contact Marina directly and ask her anything else, any other questions, that kind of thing. One last thing. I normally I wouldn't, or theoretically I shouldn't be touching on these kind of things, but someone put a comment here saying, and I don't know who this person is, but I hope you're not going to say you're partnering with God and then put your PayPal for money. And your whole talk has been awesome to that's not even a question here, but how do you because I know there was a point even for me where in university, other university kids would come and ask me to fund their mission trips.
Yeah.
When I just got in saved, and I was like, man, if I had that kind of money, like I would go on a mission trip myself. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I had this thought process about it. So what's your process on that, on taking money and putting, asking for donations, all that kind of stuff? Has it changed?
I don't ask for donations or take money personally. It all goes through New Life Church. And I know for some people, like accountability and those things are important. And that's partially why I mainly work with people I do life with, people who trust me and know my integrity. Because sometimes when things comes to money, it can get dodgy. I don't like to deal with money. So New Life Church here in Tiano, we partner very close together. So anyone who wants to donate, they donate to them. And then we send money directly to Tajikistan. So I still get in contact with money just for logistical reasons. And it's quite complicated, even how we can transfer money to Tajikistan. It's complex. And I don't really talk about it to people I don't know. If I do life with you, I know you, I trust you, I will cover that. But the people that I work with, they don't even ask for it. That's kind of amazing people I work with. But we do have an accountability process in terms of how we keep the financial records, who the money goes through, and etc. I don't have my personal PayPal that I give to people. Sometimes people do ask for my personal bank account because they want to support me personally. And even in that case, I do that, but that money goes directly to invest in life ministry. Yeah.
Wow.
If people want the accountability for that and look at the financial statement, if they're that, particular, I can provide that. That's not a problem, but it all depends on who the person is as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Boom.
Yeah.
I love that we can even bring that kind of subject up, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. We've gone way over an hour. I would love to have Ryan jump on if he doesn't mind for like a minute, just to say hi and bye.
They want to say hi and bye. Come close, please. There you go. Please.
Okay.
What's up, bro?
How's it going?
Good, man. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Married man, but now gonna be a papa.
Yeah, we just went through and had a scan today, and it's like, whoa. It's awesome.
It's all on. Well, I just wanted people to see you as well, because we've been hearing about Ryan a few times tonight. And normally what we do at the end of any interview is kind of ask people for one line or a wisdom bomb or a quote or a scripture, something they want to leave people with. And so maybe I could ask you if you had one each or one together, or a nugget, your nugget of the day.
A nugget.
Come up with a nugget, right?
Pressure's on.
The pressure is on.
Have fun. Just have fun with what you're doing. Don't get the ministry become a burden. Just have fun. Yeah. May it be a life-giving and joy-giving. Yeah.
Wow.
That's
Totally.
Come up with your own thing. You have a lot of nuggets.
A lot of nuggets. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. I'm a bit slow.
No, you're not.
No.
Got one? I don't want to put pressure, but if you do have one, I'd like to hear it. I know you're a wise man.
Yeah, I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
All good. But hey, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story. We'd love to have you on here 6, 8, 10 months down the track to track this journey with you. I'm sure there are some people that would want to contact you and support this in whatever little way they can. So if you can send me that email address, I'll send these guys to you. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for your time. Joseph, you're amazing.
Man.
Absolutely amazing. It's
You
an
guys
honor
are
to know
amazing.
you.
Oh, it's an honor for me to know you.
Well, that's good. It's worked both ways, man. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. Man, thank you. Thank you so much. All the best with everything. We shall be in touch. And looking forward to when baby pops out. Good times.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Me too.
Awesome. Well, Take
Thank
care.
you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. All of you that joined us, thank you so much. And again, if you want to know more, message me and I'll send you more details. That's episode number 4. Done and out.
Faith and patience. Faith and patience. Patience means allow it to happen. Stay the same. Stay persistent. Keep going. Faith, know that it can happen at any moment. Get excited because it can happen at any moment. You were so close. Don't quit now. Keep pushing. You got this.